Hello, everybody, and welcome to Comp and Coffee. I am Ruth Thomas, Chief Evangelist here at PayScale and the current custodian of our podcast, where we aim to bring you insightful discussions, expert insights, and keep you informed and empowered in the ever-evolving landscape of compensation. So whether you're a seasoned comp pro or new to our topic, our podcast is your go-to resource for staying ahead of the curve. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee or otherwise, tune in and let's get started. So today's topic is PayScale's Compensation Best Practice Report, or as we know it here, CBPR, which was released in March the 20th, and it's our big report of the year. And I'm delighted to have two guests who we've been working with on CBPR this year, Amy Stewart, our Associate Director of Content Marketing, and Lulu Cycli, PayScale's Senior Corporate Attorney. Welcome, Lulu, and welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Hello.
Do you want to just introduce, I know you've both been on the podcast before, but for those who are tuning in new and maybe only listen to this episode, do you want to give them a quick overview of your roles? Lulu, starting with you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lulu Cycli. I'm a Senior Corporate Employment Attorney here at PayScale. Been here a little over 2 years, and in addition to my role at helping advising PayScale on employment-related matters, I work very closely with Ruth and Amy on all things pay legislation, pay compensation legislation, anything like that.
And my name is Amy Stewart, and I'm the Associate Director of Content Marketing, like Ruth said.
Great, thank you. Okay, so before we get going on CBPR, it is nearly May, as we do this recording. And in the UK, we are having a very cold weather period. And I was just telling you both earlier, this morning I went out for a walk and I was literally wearing 2 coats. So it's meant to be spring. What is it like where you are? I'm calling in from London. Where are you calling in from, Amy?
I am calling in from the greater Seattle area. And up until today, we had beautiful, unusual summer-like weather in spring. And then today I woke up to cold temperatures and drenched streets, and it's been raining all day. So that is a change.
And I'm calling in from Dallas, Texas. And until yesterday, it was actually quite nice and cool in the 60s. But this morning when I went to go walk Basil, my adorable 100-pound puppy, it was already 75 degrees this morning. So Texas' summer, I think, is going to be disgusting, unfortunately. We'll see what happens.
So, Amy, I think you and I need to head to Dallas, maybe, to get a little bit warmth in our bones, because that's desperately what I'm feeling like right now. Okay, so we've got lots.
It's not even sunny outside. It's overcast.
But warm. It's warm.
But humid.
Okay.
It's different.
Okay, let's dive in here because we've got lots to talk about when it comes to the Compensation Best Practice Report. Amy, you were the lead writer or the author on this report. For anyone not familiar with it, can you tell us what it's about and what it covers?
Yes. So this is the 2024 Compensation Best Practices Report, which takes data analysis from a survey that we run in late 2023. So it runs in November and December of the previous year. We pull the data at the beginning of the year and we share it with all our audience in March. This year, we had over 5,000 responses to the survey and allows us to segment the data by company size and by industry and by just like other ways of cutting it so that we can draw really interesting insights about what is going on with compensation management. So it's not a salary survey in the sense of what people are earning for different positions. That's certainly very familiar to our audience, but this is a compensation management report that covers a lot of different topics around what is happening in the world of the function of compensation from a job role position. And so we are very excited to share the insights on this podcast today.
Great. Thank you, Amy. So it's a very long report, lots of data in that. What were some of the topics that we covered?
All right. So yes, it is a 100+ page report. So it is quite a long report. I think it's fun to read, but obviously your, endurance for that type of analysis will differ depending on, maybe what happened that day or how interested you are in learning what is happening out there in the world of compensation management. But we cover a lot of topics in the report. We always cover pay increases. We always cover compensation strategy, salary data usage, and pay analysis and pay communications. But this year we covered a lot of trending topics as well. And I believe we will focus on those a little bit more for this podcast. So we covered some things like artificial intelligence and its use in compensation. Talk about skills-based workforces, utilizing skills-based pay, talk about unions, minimum wage, and there's a whole section on pay transparency. Obviously, that has been huge, both in the legislature and in the topics of interest the last couple of years. And our resident expert, Lulu, is here with us today. Definitely dive into that in a little bit more detail.
Yes, so let's start right there then. Your favorite topic, Lulu, pay transparency. What were your favorite nuggets from the report this year?
Well, it's no surprise pay transparency is now becoming a best practice of organizations, especially with all of the legislation that has been flying through to a bunch of states like Washington, California, Colorado, New York, Hawaii, and so many more. So this year in CBPR, we saw that 60% of organizations are publishing pay ranges, regardless of whether it's required by law. This is a huge number because this is up from 45% last year. We also saw a good amount of organizations tell us that pay transparency is having an impact on their employees, whether that's a good impact, a positive impact, or a negative impact. So 27% of those organizations we polled say that employees are asking more questions about their pay. 14% have said that employees have quit because they saw job postings with higher pay somewhere else. 11% have seen an internal job posting for a similar role and realized they were being paid less. And more encouragingly, 14% say that employees have expressed some sort of appreciation for transparent pay practices. So overall, I think it's a really good story. And I think as more legislation that gets passed and put into effect, we're going to see these numbers jump up, I imagine probably next year.
And Amy, anything you wanted to add on there in terms of pay transparency insights?
No, I'll just double down on it. It's gone up from 45% to 60%. So that means we are now in a majority of organizations saying pay transparency is something we do as a best practice, regardless of whether or not it is required by the locations that where they are hiring or evaluating talent. And I personally think that that's huge because it means that, approximately one in four job candidates or employees in the role are impacted by this. And that's going to change behavior and expectation, regardless of whether or not your particular state or area has passed this legislation, because you're going to see those jobs, in other locations. And that's a trend of expectation. And when the job market is in the employee's favor, I think we're really going to see the impact of that.
So as I read the report, Lulu, I could really see the impact that pay transparency is having overall on compensation strategy. My general takeaway was that it's forcing employers to be more intentional about setting and implementing their compensation strategy and building more rigor into their compensation processes. But what are you seeing in the data and generally in terms of how pay transparency is changing strategy? And what's the risk of not adopting pay transparency?
So, like Amy just said, we have to remember that pay transparency is now impacting, I believe it's actually more than one in four employees in the US. One in four is the last number that we looked at. So that really means that employees or employers, organizations who don't adopt pay transparency are losing out on top candidates. But on the other side of that, they may also be losing out on top performers. So legally speaking, if organizations who are required to comply with some sort of pay transparency laws, if they refuse to comply, most of the states have teeth to these laws, meaning that there are steep fines associated with not complying. There's lawsuits folks can bring with not complying. And we're actually seeing that already happen in states like Washington State. There are so many class action lawsuits right now being filed against organizations who are either refusing to post pay ranges or are posting pay ranges that are so wide that they're posting these ranges that are not complying with the law. And we're also seeing this happen in New York State as well. So we have seen historically a lot of organizations say, we're going to roll the dice and we'll just throw money at the legal problem in case we get caught. But what we're seeing is that the court of public opinion, so even if an organization isn't getting dinged by lawsuits and penalties and fines, it's a lot harder to throw money at a PR problem. So the court of public opinion is a lot harder to throw money at to make their PR nightmares go away.
Yeah, that's an important point to note. And I mean, we can't talk about pay transparency without talking about pay comms, Amy, and pay communications, because they're heavily related. What's your view on that? And what do we see people were doing in respect of pay communications?
Yes, I am hoping and anticipating that pay communications are going to grow in popularity over the next few years as pay transparency is pushed out there. As Lulu said, the spirit of the law is to try to communicate with job candidates and with employees what the real pay ranges are. And that has had some, differing ways that employers are interpreting that. But I think when you get down to pay communications, it gets much more clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And we are seeing that more organizations are investing in pay communications from the compensation best practices report. So this is the first year that 51% of organizations say they train managers on pay communications. That's an astounding figure to me because only about half of organizations train managers on how to talk about pay with their employees. And that is the, primary core transactional relationship between an employee and their employer. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into job satisfaction, engagement, loyalty, hiring, and retention processes. But I think what you are paid and the knowledge that you have of how fairly you are paid is a primary reason that people are employed. So not able to understand that and not training managers to communicate about it is a big miss, especially if you are putting a lot of effort and energy into your pay practices, into your compensation strategy, into your equitable pay structure to make them fair. Communicate that to your employees, you're not seeing the value of it. So I do anticipate or expect or hope that pay communications will become the pay transparency 2.0 of the future. We really kind of drill down on what we're trying to achieve there and start doing a better job at it.
Great, thank you. So you've obviously had to focus on the many facts in the report, Amy. So if you were to pick a favorite child, what's the most fascinating thing that you found in the study this year?
That is a very difficult question because there are over 100 questions in the survey and they all offer, the fascinating insights. But if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be along those same lines about fair pay. We asked a question in the report of, what do you do to address severely underpaid employees? We do not provide a specific definition for what that means, but like severely underpaid is a pretty clear understanding of this employee should be making more than they currently are. Whether that means that they're a star performer and they're making the midpoint of their range, or they are being paid below the pay range, whatever that means to your organization, what do you do to address it? And 27% of organizations said they don't do anything unless their manager or the employee themselves. And I think that sets up a dichotomy for employees to feel like there's not really trust with the organization to care about them and the valuable work that they do. If you have to proactively beg or ask or set up appointments with your manager or HR to be paid fairly, like not to make more extra or bonus, but to be paid fairly, that sets up expectation that the company just doesn't really value you. And I think that is what leads to lack of engagement and higher turnover when the market is viable. So that would be my kind of favorite stat from the report.
And I think we also saw intent to do pay equity drop off slightly in 2024, didn't we, Amy, compared to 2023? So if I remember rightly, we saw a big jump in organizations' intent to address pay equity from 22 to 23. And then this year, it's just marginally dropped off by 1%, I think. Is it now 62%? So it's still a majority saying that they intend to address pay equity in organizations. I don't know. Do you have any views on why that's happened? I mean, I know it's a minor drop, but
to start, I think, why did it go up so much? So during the COVID COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw pay equity jump in prominence for a lot of organizations. I think memory serves, and don't quote me on these numbers from past reports because I don't always retain the numbers forever in my head, but I want to say it was around 38% when I first started the compensation best practices report for pay scale. It was well under a majority, jumped to like 42 or 45, and then it jumped to 63 last year. That's an incredible closing of the gap between organizations that didn't do pay equity at all to those that are saying, we care about this and we're trying to do it. Whether they do it well is another question. It's not but they're trying to do it. And that did drop off by 1%. I don't think that drop is, it's not really significant. We could see it jump up again next year. We could see it drop off again slightly. I would say about the same number of organizations are investing in pay equity now. What we didn't see is it continued to go up. So it didn't go from like 62 to 70 or 62 to 80. It's a majority of organizations, but has taken a bit of a backseat to economic concerns and other things that are plaguing organizations right now. We've also seen that echoed in like lack of investment or a rollback of investment in DEI strategy. I personally think is tragic and should be something that organizations are spending more time caring about. I do think it matters to the workforce. It matters to the labor force.
Well, I think it
Right.
goes.
And Lulu, what was your take on fair pay? Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it goes hand in hand with the pay transparency laws, right? With pay transparency laws becoming more and more popular, organizations who refuse to conduct any sort of internal analysis will find out the hard way if they refuse to do, checks on fair pay. Because what ends up happening is that employees are going to be more interested in asking about their pay. They'll start seeing job postings that have higher ranges than what they're being paid for. And then they're going to start asking questions. And 9 times out of the 10, the employees who are going to ask those questions are your high performers. And if your high performers start jumping ship for higher paying jobs, how hard and how expensive is it going to be to replace them? So, I mean, your organizations really, especially with the development of pay transparency laws becoming so popular, they have to really do these internal checks. And if your organization develops a reputation of not paying people fairly, you're going to have people jumping ship and you're not going to be able to recruit on the back end.
Yeah. I mean, I think these things all link together, pay transparency, pay equity, addressing pay fairness, and pay communications. And I know, there are concerns around potentially addressing pay equity in organizations for many reasons. But I think we're too far down the journey in terms of employee expectations around pay transparency. And so I know we hear from on the webinars that we do, Lulu, a lot of the audience saying, they're finding it hard to persuade their business leaders. But I think you really have to look at this as has to be a key integral part of your talent strategy today, because it all comes back to this trust in pay practices being a really critical element of the employee engagement equation. And if you lose that trust, then you have disengaged employees who are more likely to be less productive, may leave your organization. So we really do need to join the dots between those different issues. So other than pay transparency, Lulu, what was your most fascinating fact or insight from the report? Was there anything else that you wanted to pull out?
Yeah, I think the minimum wage piece was really interesting, although probably not quite as surprising as I expected, just because in January of 2024, we saw 25 states and 38 municipalities, whether cities or counties, increase their minimum wage. So, not surprisingly, we found in the report that minimum wage is going to impact compensation strategy for 27% of organizations. If you want more information about the minimum wage and how that's going to impact your organization, Ruth and I did a Comp and Coffee with some other colleagues of ours. That's episode 89. So check that out for sure. But in CBPR specifically, we do already see that 36% of organizations are already paying above the minimum wage. So they said they would not be impacted. We saw that about a quarter, 27% of organizations say that minimum wage is going to impact their compensation strategy. And this number, this 27% number, is over 30% for larger organizations and as high as 37% for organizations with more than 50,000 employees. It's highest for the food and beverage industry at 46%. And I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, especially if y'all have employees who are fast food workers in California, because just this month, a few weeks ago on April 1st, California adopted a $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers. So I think that 46% number for the fast food workers, those were organizations anticipating this new minimum wage, this significant minimum wage increase for their California population.
Yeah, Amy, anything you want to add on about minimum wages?
I would add that the percentage of organizations that take CBPR is split between smaller companies and larger companies. Not every company has minimum wage workers or doesn't have them in large enough quantities where they are impacted by this, which is why that 27% number isn't 60% or 80% of organizations that are impacted. But minimum wage does impact low wage workers, even if they don't make minimum wage, when it comes to pay compression. So I think that a lot of organizations, whether they have minimum wage workers or not, are impacted by the minimum wage in their area because it does impact their overall compensation strategy when it comes to, what is our floor for wages for the workers that we have. We did say that 54% of organizations are concerned about pay compression in 2024. 29% say that it is less of a concern this year compared to previous years because coming out of the Great Resignation, wages were growing rapidly for a lot of positions, and that was putting a lot of pressure on compensation structures being fair to market. So it's not everyone, but it is certainly having an impact. And with inflation still being higher than we want, it is certainly still an issue this year and probably for next year.
And I think too, I think organizations really have to pay attention to these minimum wage increases, especially I point to California because California and Washington have some of the highest minimum wage jumps just for cities, for specific cities. Looking at like the Bay Area in California, for an example, there's some minimum wages there that are over $20 an hour, hovering around $20 an hour. So if these minimum wage jumps are so significant for your organization, you have to kind of consider pay compression in case that you have to meet maybe your lowest wage workers up to the minimum wage and then looking at that next level above to see if that's going to cause any compression issues.
And I think many of these minimum wage increases are like multi-year deals, aren't they? So I think if you haven't got a strategy of how to deal with that now, you need to get a strategy of how you're going to tackle any inequity issues that they cause through your pay structures, because this is going to be an ongoing development, as we continue to kind of like slowly increase the minimum wage floor, basically. Okay, so minimum wage we've discussed. What else can we talk about? Another topic was unionization, somewhat related. But that also sort of links to topics about fair pay because we saw kind of quite a lot of union activity through 23. What do you think was most interesting, Lulu, about the data that we saw on employers' responses to unions?
So, 2023 was like a very big year for unionization, whether that was because of, Hollywood basically shutting down for the whole year because of the WGA and SAG strikes, or seeing, Amazon employees and Starbucks employees start organizing and creating unions. But what was interesting to me is that according to our CBPR report, we've found that 70% of organizations actually don't bargain with a union currently. But 4% say they do now as a recent change in the past few years. So to me, that 4% number may not seem significant, but it's significant. That's a big jump for union activity with organizations. So, and that 4% does include organizations across company size and industry. In our report, 72% of organizations say they're not concerned about future unionization. And studies show that younger generations are more pro-union and unionization may increase due to public sentiment, especially when it comes to fair pay. And I would just add that I'm curious to see what this number does next year, especially in light of the presidential election on the US side, to see if that's going to make any changes politically.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Always a struggle with which questions do we keep year to year. But I think if unionization continues to be a hot topic, it will probably remain in the report, but we'll see as we get there with other things that are happening. I would like to chime in just that we asked, like, what are your sentiments around unionization within your organization? And we asked this to participants to answer both for their HR leadership and their, executive leadership, the CEO, the CFO, the COO. And that does differ considerably, which is what we expected. So 62% of HR leadership are more favorable toward unions. They recognize that this is a communication and marketing strategy with the people that you want to have engaged and retained within your workforce. Whereas for executive leadership, it was 38%. And a lot of it comes down to, what is the cost of this? How is this going to increase pricing, complexity, bureaucracy, growth of the business in terms of the impacts of bargaining? So I think those 62% between 38% is a pretty wide divide. But really, senior leaders need to be talking to each other about what it is they're trying to, achieve when it comes to talent strategy, and that working with the union can be beneficial for executive leadership as well as the employees.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a big gap too. And I think it really represents maybe something we talked about earlier about HR and compensation folks having a struggle to try and get leadership buy-in. I think it's the same thing here. Like, when you work in HR or comp, you're fairly tuned into like the needs and desires of your workforce and what your employees want. And, we are seeing this interesting debate play out around who has power in the workforce. And labour market swings. Normally, sometimes it's in the favour of the employees, like we saw during the Great Resignation. And then, there's been, with some of the layoffs last year, people saying it was coming back to the employer, and many employers hoping that the power was coming back to them. But I don't think we're necessarily going to see that same trend anymore. I think the world has opened up, and the power of employees has massively increased. Their agency has increased in the workforce for many reasons. And I think we have to learn to adapt to that, and leadership need to understand really that they need to harness worker passion and energy to create mutual benefits for everybody. So a really interesting topic. Now, we're not actually necessarily on camera, but I'm just enjoying watching Amy's cat doing acrobats in the background. If we can social snip that, we should just put that on LinkedIn, I think. What's your cat's name, Amy?
Her name is Ari, and yes, she's very active right now.
Right. I think we should just do a snip on her, basically, and that can be our social clip for LinkedIn. Okay. So those were our favorite topics. I always know the audience's favorite topics, or one of the favorite topics, is pay increases. What's going to happen? What happened in 23? What happened in 2024? So tell us, Amy, what was the key data points that we saw come out of that?
Yes. And I think it's a good time of year to talk about pay increases too, because the majority of organizations have just been through them. Pay increases do happen all year round. It can depend on when your fiscal year is and how you roll things out to your workforce. But the majority of organizations will pay increases somewhere between December and March. And we are now in April. So we are starting to feel the the pay increase strategy that we employed, and whether it is keeping workers engaged and retained, or if it is not doing that. So it's also interesting that this is the first year that we asked in our survey for a straight number, a decimal point number from our audience, rather than selecting from a list of multiple choices with like a range. So we're able to calculate a overall average for pay increases. And in 2023, organizations they get 4.8% as the average base pay increase. And that is, I don't think I need to explain to this audience, comparatively high to what pay increases have been since the Great Recession of 2007, 2008. So a lot of that has to do with, cost of living increases, all of the wage growth that we've seen throughout COVID and the Great Resignation. And we don't anticipate that it is going to remain this high indefinitely. But for now, in 2023, it was 4.8, and the predicted percent for 2024 was 4.5. So most organizations on average already gave 4.5% average increase to their workers. Now, that can incorporate a number of different things. Some organizations say we're going to give 3% for inflation and then another percent on top of that for merit. Other organizations conflate those things together. It will be an interesting conversation I think that we can dig into, especially for salary budget planning season. Comes later in the year. And I will say that SBS is, although it's not open yet, we do a survey mid-year on salary increase planning. So if that is something of interest to you, both to see what the actual number was in 2024 versus the planned number, and also what people are preparing for 2025, that will be open for participation soon. So, keep an eye out for that popping up over the next.
Yeah, thanks for calling that, Amy, out. So yes, our salary budget survey, which is an annual survey we do, we're going out to fielding and results come out in July. And I've scheduled in us to record a podcast then, Amy, so we can dig into the results from the salary budget survey. Okay, so let's close out here. We can't not talk about one of the most talked about topics of the year, which is AI. We dug a little deep into AI this year because we knew it was something people were interested in. So what were the key kind of headlines we saw, Amy, in terms of what people are feeling and thinking about AI?
Yes, I think AI is going to continue to be a fascinating topic throughout this year and in future years. We are now transitioning from the age of information to the age of AI. It's going to have ramifications on our economy that we can't yet know what that's going to look like. But we did ask our audiences in the report, what best describes your personal sentiment around AI generally? Not generative AI specifically, but kind of AI holistically as a term, artificial intelligence. And answers were fairly split. 49% were positive overall, 17% were pessimistic, and 34% were unsure. We also asked the positive responders what they were excited about, and the negative responders what they were concerned about. And while there are multiple answer choices, the biggest excitement is for the potential of AI to reduce unfulfilling work. And the biggest concern with AI is that it will extend bias rather than mitigate it. We've seen quite a lot of news, I think, on both of those topics recently. Lulu, curious on your take, especially in regards to bias.
Yeah, I mean, AI is going to be a great tool, but until we get the bias kinks from those programmers out of the tool itself, it's still going to be a problem. And I think legal entities like the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, recognize that because they've come out and they've said, hey, organizations, if you guys use AI tools in recruiting and hiring and making any sort of decisions, and that AI tool is inherently biased or discriminatory, hey, guess what? You guys are on the hook. So that's why I think it's going to be really important for HR professionals and comp professionals to stay on board with companies who are using AI, because we still need that human gut check and we still need that human set of eyes on any decision that AI is making. Many states on the legal side, we are seeing like California and New York and New Jersey are actually proposing laws right now that will, if passed, will require employers to disclose whether they are using AI in their recruiting practices. And California is even taking it a step further that if passed, if organizations do use AI in the recruiting process, those organizations are going to have to allow candidates to opt out of AI and actually say like, hey, I'd like a human set of eyes look at my resume as opposed to this bot who's just going to look at my resume and compare it to the job description. So I think lawmakers are heightenedly aware of what this could do for the industry. So I'm glad to see that we're seeing some laws at least making their way through the legislative process right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that development. Now, we asked people what they thought about AI sentiment generally. Did we ask them about their view about using AI in compensation, Amy?
We absolutely did. And I think the results there are even more fascinating. So we asked, what is your organization's overall sentiment around using AI to make compensation decisions? And again, this is AI generally, not generative AI, which was the big hype news of 2023 news cycle. But in asking about the use of AI for comp decisions, 50% were undecided, 31% are cautiously optimistic, 12% are against it or actively prohibit it, and only 7% are totally on board. We also asked a matrix question about what specifically organizations are using AI to do for a variety of HR and comp related activities, from we're using this now to we are developing it to we are not using it, have no plans to use it, or unsure about using it. And the results there are pretty fascinating. What I think is interesting is just that 7% that are, well, only 7% that are totally on board. When AI can power compensation related decisions right now, if you are using software that has any automated processes with machine learning or deep learning baked into that process, then you're already using AI to make compensation decisions. We are not talking about asking ChatGPT to market price jobs for you. If you are utilizing software that does calculations automatically for you, there is a element of AI that is involved in that. So I do think there is a lot of education that is needed around what exactly AI is, how does it work. We need more transparency around what it does and why you should trust it. But it can be pretty fascinating and I think pretty useful to reduce that unfulfilling work, which is what the optimistic people were hoping for. So you can use AI to draft job descriptions within product. We have a tool where 2,300 job summaries have already been generated utilizing AI technology, and you can also use deep learning to match jobs, auto match jobs, or to select surveys for you that you may not know that exist, but could help you match jobs. So there is obviously still a human judgment component of compensation management, and that also needs to be emphasized within the space. But AI does have a lot of potential to reduce some of that burdensome manual work, and I think that is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I think
Great, thank you.
Like Amy said, sorry, Ruth, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like Amy said, AI is going to help. It's a productivity tool, but it's not going to do the work for you. It may get you 75% there, but that additional 25%, that is going to be required work for a human, especially human comp professionals. So if you make any pay equity mistakes because AI told you this is what the salary should be, you can't blame the technology. And actually, the EEOC is suing a very large HR software company right now for this exact very thing. But you have to always make sure that there's going to be a human check and a human set of eyes on anything that AI does.
It's more like a recommendation engine. So if you think about utilizing Netflix or some other streaming service where it says, you watched the show, would you be interested in the show? That's an example of AI. So you use this survey to price jobs. Are you interested in this one for these other jobs that we see that you have? That's AI. And I think a lot of organizations can utilize that. It's just the human judgment to put on top of that. You can't just rely on it to do all of the work for you. That's not a best practice. And I know that we are running out of time on this particular podcast. There's a ton of content related to this for World at Work's Total Rewards 24 conference that is coming up later this month. And PayScale is on a panel with Ben Eubanks and Jason Abergook and Elizabeth Crowfoot from Lightcast. And that should be a really fascinating deep dive into this topic with all of those experts on a panel together. And I hear it's already like a filled room, like they've already closed it out. But there's a lot to discuss around this topic. I think a lot of potential for overhauling and improving the industry.
Well, that's a great segue mentioning World at Work there, Amy, because that is exactly what our next episode is going to be about. So we'll delve into everything that we think is going to be happening at World at Work. And I'm going to be joined by a couple of PayScale colleagues who will be hosting sessions there along with myself. So that is going to be our next episode. But thanks to both of you for sharing your favorite insights from CBPR. I know we all love it. It gives us lots of food for thought as we think about creating thought leadership and working with our customers and prospects. So thank you both very much, Lulu and Amy, for joining me today. If listeners want to find CBPR, Amy, where can they find it?
Yes, it is on payscale.com under the Research and Insights tab on the main menu. There's also banners everywhere pointing to it. So go download it there. It is free to download. You do not have to pay for the result of the survey, nor do you have to have been a participant to download it. It is available to everyone.
Great. And I think we also talked a little bit about AI and what PayScale are doing about AI. There's also a page you can find on our website too under solutions. And that will it's a new landing page that we've just put up, which kind of brings together all the activities we're doing on AI. So if you're interested to hear what we're doing here at PayScale, then go and check that out. Okay, so thank you, everybody. That's what we think. Do grab a copy of CBPR, have another coffee and read CBPR, and let us know what you think. You can always email us at coffee@payscale.com and tell us any interesting snips that you found in CBPR, or if there's something else you'd like us to discuss here on Comp and Coffee. Thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.